The Forgotten Ones. Chapter 7. The Keeper's Secret. Ellis sat slumped against the smooth, mirrored wall, his body trembling. His mind couldn't fully process what had just happened. The reflection's hollow eyes still burned into his memory. For a moment, he allowed himself to breathe, to feel the weight of his own existence, his chest rising and falling as if confirming that he was still here. Still him. But the room wouldn't let him rest for long. The sterile silence closed in around him once again. And Ellis knew he couldn't stay still. Not in this place. Not with them watching. He struggled to his feet, the mirrored surfaces rippling slightly as his reflection mimicked the motion, perfectly synchronized once again. Ellis's gaze darted across the walls, searching for any kind of exit, some weakness in the impossible geometry of this place. But there was nothing. Just reflection stretching into infinity, a maze of his own image echoing endlessly back at him. Think, he told himself, his voice a shaky whisper. There has to be a way out. Then it came to him. The map. The old journal he'd found at Peter's place. The one Peter had left behind in his frantic attempt to escape. It had mentioned something about a keeper of the reflection, someone who knew how to navigate the space between worlds. Ellis fumbled with his bag, his fingers shaking as he pulled out the journal, flipping through its weathered pages. The words were cryptic, most of them written in Peter's frantic scrawl. But one phrase stood out. The keeper hides in plain sight. Seek him, and the reflections shall yield. Ellis's breath hitched. The keeper. He remembered Peter talking about him once, back when they first started researching the old building's history. A mysterious figure who was said to be the only one who could navigate the mirrors without becoming trapped. But Peter had never found him. Or if he did, he'd never lived long enough to tell anyone. Still, it was a lead. It was something. Ellis pushed forward, determined to find a way to summon this so-called keeper. The mirrored walls bent and shifted as he walked, the reflections rippling unnervingly at the edges of his vision. Like something waiting just beneath the surface. He could feel it. Something watching him, tracking his every movement, waiting for the right moment to strike. But Ellis kept going, determined not to stop. Not now. He followed the twisting, endless hallways, his footsteps echoing back at him from every direction. The reflections twisted and warped around him, distorting the further he went. Their features becoming more grotesque, their grins wider, their eyes hollow and black. The whispers began again. Faint at first, but growing louder as he ventured deeper into the maze. They spoke in tongues he didn't understand, voices layered upon voices, drowning his thoughts in their chaotic chorus. Ellis clenched his fists, trying to block out the sound, but it was no use. The voices were everywhere, crawling inside his mind like parasites. Then suddenly, the whispers stopped. Ellis froze, the silence more unsettling than the noise had been. The air felt thicker now, oppressive, like something was bearing down on him from all sides. And then, ahead of him, the reflections parted. In the distance, standing in the middle of the mirrored hallway, was a figure. At first, Ellis thought it was another reflection, just another twisted version of himself, one of the many that had been following him. But this one was different. Its face was obscured, shadowed, and its posture was wrong. It didn't move like the others, didn't mimic his movements. It stood there waiting, watching. Ellis's breath caught in his throat. The keeper. The figure turned slowly, beckoning Alice forward with a single, slow motion of its hand. Despite the fear gnawing at his insides, Alice found himself stepping toward the figure, drawn in by some invisible force. As he approached, the figure's features came into focus, though the shadow still clung to its form like a living thing. Its face was hidden beneath a hood, its eyes glowing faintly from within the darkness, piercing through Alice as though seeing into the deepest corners of his soul. "Are you the Keeper?" Alice asked, his voice barely a whisper. The figure didn't respond, not at first. Instead, it slowly raised a hand, pointing toward the wall beside them. Alice followed the gesture, his gaze landing on the mirrored surface. But this time, his reflection wasn't there. Instead, the mirror showed something else. Another place entirely. It was the building. The old, abandoned structure he and Peter had once explored together. But this time, the image was different. The rooms were filled with strange, shadowy figures, their bodies flickering and warping, their faces hidden behind dark hoods like the one standing beside him. The Watchers. They moved through the hallways, their presence corrupting everything they touched, leaving nothing but void in their wake. Alice stepped back, horror flooding his veins. This was what Peter had been trying to warn him about. This was the truth behind the reflections. They see everything. The Keeper finally spoke, its voice a low, rasping whisper that seemed to echo through the entire space. "They are everywhere." Ellis swallowed hard, his mind racing. "How do I stop them? How do I get out of here?" The Keeper's head tilted slightly, as though considering his question. Then it pointed again, this time to the journal still clutched in Alice's hands. Alice looked down at the weathered pages, flipping through them with shaking fingers. The Keeper's eyes followed his movements, its gaze never wavering. Finally, Alice found the page, the one he hadn't noticed before. It was an old drawing, a diagram of the mirrors and how they connected. And in the center of it all, a single word: break. Alice looked up at the Keeper, realization dawning. The mirrors. They're the key, aren't they? If I break them, I can. Before he could finish, the Keeper was gone, vanished as though it had never been there at all. The hallway stretched out in front of him once more, endless and empty, the reflections watching silently from their mirrors. But now Alice knew what he had to do. He turned, eyes scanning the walls, looking for any weakness, any crack in the smooth surface. And then he saw it, a faint ripple in the distance, a distortion in the reflection, just like the one Peter had mentioned before he disappeared. Without hesitation, Alice ran toward it, heart pounding in his chest. The whispers grew louder again, the reflections shifting and distorting as he approached, but he didn't stop. He couldn't stop. This was his only chance. He reached the ripple, his hand trembling as he pressed it against the surface. The glass bent beneath his touch, giving way like liquid, pulling him in. And then, with a final push, Alice shattered through the mirror. The sound of breaking glass echoed through the void, and Alice plunged into darkness, uncertain if he had escaped or if he had only fallen deeper into the Watcher's trap. If you're ready to follow Alice into the unknown and uncover the truth lurking behind the reflections, make sure to like, subscribe, and share, so you don't miss the next chapter of this twisted tale. What secrets does the Keeper hold, and can Alice really escape the Watcher's grasp? Join me next time to find out. Until then, remember, sometimes the only way out is to break through. The stories may end, but the nightmares continue. Sleep soundly. If your mind lets you.